So how to start learning programming. We're going to get technical. We're going to get hands on the keyboard in this video. I'm going to show you from the very start. And just so you guys know, I've done zero prep work into making this video. I'm going to organically show you how I'm going to go about learning what will be a new programming language for me. Like I said, C# in this case, but you could pretty much watch this video and apply the same steps, the same methodology to learning whatever programming language you're trying to learn. Maybe it's Python, Java, something like that, right? No matter what language you pick, the steps should be pretty much the same. And one thing that I like to say right before I get into it, I know a lot of you guys are trying to get a higher paying job or trying to get into this field. Maybe you are coming from a completely unrelated field. Well, I've created the top 10 interview questions absolutely for free down in the description below. Check it out. These are really vital questions to be able to answer to succeed on an interview. And I have detailed responses and additional resources to dive into from there. So check that out if you fit that category, and let's get right back into it. So I have google.com right open in front of me because this is where I would start with a programming language. You want to look up, or whatever search engine of choice you have. You want to look up, first you want to find out what code editor can you use. Now, I'll say for most languages, you could use a simple text editor, or pretty much you have a lot of freedom and flexibility here. Like you might use like VS Code. For example, if you're learning Python, you can use VS Code or Sublime Text or Atom or any of those. Completely fine. Maybe even prefer like PyCharm or something like that. If you have a license, you can do that. But yeah, with C#, it's generally a little different. So what code editor, like we're really going to be this simple with it. What code editor should I use for C#? And they're saying Visual Studio Code, and that's something you can use. Now, we could also look at like an article here. So let's just take the same approach we did recently, and let's just open up a bunch of it, and we'll get some different opinions here before we decide on what code editor to use. So we see Visual Studio Code, Mono Develop. Now, maybe because I said the word code editor rather than development environment, there is technically a difference between that. So that's probably why we don't see like Visual Studio or any of those tools. Visual Studio versus Visual Studio Code for C#. So we could use a code editor like Visual Studio Code, or we could use a full IDE, which is an integrated development environment, Visual Studio. These are two different applications, by the way. So this one's by Microsoft, whereas this one is like an open source application. But basically the difference between an IDE and a code editor, it's a bit of a thin line, especially with VS Code, where you can install a bunch of extensions and basically turn it into an IDE. But an IDE just has more bells and whistles, like more features, more automation essentially baked into it. So it's like a full-on development environment, whereas and usually it's specific for certain languages, whereas code editors you can use with pretty much any programming language, and out of the box comes with a lot less features and things like that. So we basically have two main options between these to use, and we could even look on like Reddit and see like what other people are saying in terms of which one should we use and blah, blah, blah. I'm going to keep things fairly simple here, and I'm just going to pick one of them. I'm going to pick Visual Studio in this case, so Visual Studio. But just know that, yeah, I could use VS Code. I could use a bunch of different editors or IDEs. It's really up to you what you decide to use. So if you do decide to learn C#, then you'd want to follow along, then you could just go ahead and Google Visual Studio and you would download it. If you want to get VS Code, right, you could just type VS Code and you could go here and download it. Most likely if you're learning like a different language, especially like a Python or Ruby or anything like that, just get VS Code from here, absolutely for free as well, and should be no problem. So we'll just go ahead and download the community version, which is the free version. And we'll run through the setup. I'm going to do this on my regular machine. We could do this in a VM as well if we wanted to. But yeah, that's the kind of research process I do ahead of time. So if you want to learn Python, you could literally just type best code editors for Python. Like if you really didn't know anything about any of the languages, obviously everyone has their own opinion of what is the best code editor, right? But I was just trying to show you guys, like if you had no idea, let's just say, if you had absolutely no idea what the different code editors were, you could type something in like this. You could see there's Atom, there's Sublime, there's a bunch of different ones. You could open different articles and you could even read about them, figure out. But if you aren't sure, I would say just start with, I would recommend just start with VS Code, just Visual Studio Code right here. That's the one I prefer. But I'm going to go a little bit outside of my comfort zone here, and we're going to learn some Visual Studio stuff for it. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's see, did it? Okay, it's installing right now. And usually the way this works is you can choose which packages you want to install. We'll switch it to dark mode. And yeah, we can basically go from here. We'll wait till this is done and we'll continue on. So the different packages they have for this is .NET Core, ASP.NET, which is like for web development. .NET Core is for like desktop development. We're probably going to need .NET Core for sure, because if we want to use this for security purposes, like hacking and stuff, if we want to do it with like local stuff that can interact with, say, the Windows API, we're probably going to use .NET Core for that, I would think. And probably if we want to do stuff like creating some web hacking tools and things like that, we could get ASP.NET Core as well. We don't need Unity, that's for game development. And I'm not even, this is machine learning, it looks like down here, so we don't need those things. And we don't have to worry about any kind of C++ stuff or anything like that. So we should be good to just grab these two things here. These are for other programming languages here. So if we want to do stuff with Python, JavaScript, Node.js, we can download those packages. But I think to be safe, we'll just get .NET Core and ASP.NET Core, and we'll call it a day on that one. So let's go ahead and defer on the sign up for now. We'll do dark mode, and we'll just do like the general. We'll start it up. I think in here is where you can choose your packages. So the first thing, this is like a launcher here that we downloaded, like the installer. And then from there, now we can start choosing, I think, whichever one. So I could be wrong about that. It's been a while since I played around with this stuff. If I hit modify, let's see. Okay, yeah, here's where it was. I did kind of skip over it, unfortunately. But yeah, let's just go here. Tell it to install ASP.NET. And what do I have already? I have .NET Core already, I think. Do I? Or do I not? Let's see here. This is what we're going to want for sure. Desktop development. And I don't care about mobile. I don't care about platform development, C++ stuff, or any of the other languages. So yeah, just these two should be good. So let's just select those, hit modify. And now it's going to start installing that. So that is like the basic setup that we need to do. But how would we learn the actual language? Well, you don't really need coding books anymore in 2022. What I would really recommend is to just keep things very simple. Like, let's just Google, to start, we'll say C# Hello World tutorial. So this is where I'll start. So if you're learning Python, say Python Hello World tutorial. If you're learning JavaScript Hello World tutorial, and so on, right? Now we could go straight from the Microsoft site, possibly, and learn it. And this is how we print stuff to the screen in C#. We do a console.writeLine hello world. So we can actually do the built-in editor if we wanted to. Console.writeLine, and then hello world. or whatever text we wanted it to be. And we got to end it with semicolons in this language. So we'll run that. And then we see the console output here. So my edited text, right? Whatever we want it to be. Hit run, and then that shows up there. So that's that. It's kind of abstracting away some of the stuff, though, unfortunately. There's more code we need in order to actually do hello world in here. I do believe, like, we need a class and all that stuff in a programming language like C#. So yeah, if we look at another tutorial like this one here, we can see that information this time around. So we can do something like this. Here's another thing we can do. When you're dealing with like an IDE or something you're not familiar with, you could look at C#, hello world, and then Visual Studio. Not Visual Studio Code, but Visual Studio in our case. And I can open this article here. It's going to be create a simple C# console app in Visual Studio. So how do we do that? So create new project. And okay, we need the console application. So we have to wait for this to finish because that's going to download the desktop development, which we need in order to create console applications. So we're actually going to have to wait on that to complete real quick. And we're going to name it. We're going to give it a name, whatever we want to name it. We'll name it Hello World, probably, in our case. And yeah, once it's created, it should have the extra stuff. Like, it should fill in this part for us, all this stuff. And then we can just put in the system console write line, Hello World. And then we should be good to go. I think I modified the wrong one last time, unfortunately. So we're going to use Visual Studio Community 2022. So let's modify this one and make sure we're installing it to the correct version this time around. And modify that. Okay, and we are now good to go. And we have modified Visual Studio Community 2022 to install both ASP.NET Core and the desktop development tool. So let's go ahead and launch it from here, making sure we launch the correct one, 2022. And I can clean this up later. I can uninstall these other ones if I don't plan on using it. But let's just create a new project. And now we see we have all these other options. Before, all we had was like the generic one, wherever it was. We have a lot more options, in fact. So what we need to do is create the console app, right? And we can, if we didn't know, we can just go through and look at the steps they gave us here. And again, if you're using a different technology, a different programming language, I'm sure you can find an article on how to do whatever you want to do, especially these really simple things like how do you create a project? How do you deploy your code? How do you, like how do you run your code, create a Hello World application, all that. So console app, completely fine. Hit next on that. And let's call it Hello World. Click next there. And then we'll click, we'll just select .NET 6.0, the default framework, and just roll with that. So then we hit create. And this is why this is an integrated development environment. It's going to be doing all this stuff for us. It's going to be setting up all the outline, all the stuff we need. So you see here, it automatically created the files and stuff for us. So we have a file called program.cs, and as a way to test it, it already created the console.writeline hello world for us. So let's just try to run it. If we hit this plus button, it should run it. And it'll execute, and we see build started. And since this is the first time we're running the build, it's probably going to be a little slower. And let's see here. Hello world, here we go. Yep, so we got the hello world, and it automatically, since this is all the stuff the development environment is doing completely for us, where it's actually waiting for us to tell it when to close out. If I ran this, like say if I ran this in VS Code, it would probably just quickly launch my command prompt and then close it out before I could even see the output. But it's actually hanging it for us so we could press any key to close the window. So that's what the actual development environment is doing for us when we run it with the plus button, which is like super nice, right? So there's a bunch of other things that it'll do for you nicely as well. And you see all these dependencies are pulled in automatically, like the .NET Core app That was because we said it's a console application and all that. But I mean, very quickly we were able to get our program up and running, and I could change this and say my new text, and I could save it and then hit the plus button again to run it. And now I see my new text right here, right? So yeah, there you go. We have created our first application, and we have successfully ran that code, saw that it executed properly through Visual Studio. So going forward, we're going to keep using this IDE for all of the C# code that we write. And in the next episode, we're going to be getting more in depth with the C# language, right? Now that we have seen that we can use the technology, right, and create a basic console application. The nice thing for us as pen testers is a lot of the useful applications that we would create are console applications, because, right, we're using the command line a lot and command line tools. So that's absolutely perfect for us. We don't have to do too crazy stuff, really, especially in the early going. So in the next video in the series, we're going to be looking at the actual language and figuring out what are the different data types. How can we create different variables and modify them and concatenate things together, and how does the language behave, right? So really getting that solid foundation down is going to help us a lot. So that is how we will proceed from here. But if I don't have those videos up already, you can check out the Black Hat Python video that I have on screen right now, an entire playlist that I did on that. And there's still more videos to come there as well. So if you've caught up on that, definitely more to look forward to. I'll see you guys right over there. Thanks for watching.